Good morning. So this morning we wanted to share this is what we do, our character sketches. These are like our favorite lesson books. And today's question is, well, I always stand up, so sorry y'all. Today's question says, what animal builds its nest almost anywhere? I'm Shalina Harris, the wife and mom of the Harris Family Tribe. I'm the founder of Women to Women and Down Home Mama. And we just want to encourage you to embrace every moment that you have. Good morning, Bonnie. We have been praying for you. Hope you feel better. And can you all see everything okay? Because it looks like everything is like moving back and forth on the phone. So if you can see everything, put a heart in the comment so that we know. Also, let us know where you're tuning in from. We would love to know, where you are and what the weather is like, because it's cold and rainy here today. Okay, what animal builds its nest almost anywhere?
A big bird.
A big bird?
Like this.
A big bird like that? Black cat chickadee. Emperor penguin.
Penguin has a little baby and it builds a nest.
Yes, it does. Sand wasp. American coot.
And I really
It's
a rat.
Deer mouse. Or a ring-necked pheasant.
Ring-necked pheasant.
You say ring-necked pheasant.
Ring-necked pheasant, if it has a baby, then it has to build a nest for the baby.
All right, Matthew. The black-capped chickadee, emperor penguin, sand wasp, American coot, shrike, deer mouse, ring-necked pheasant.
This one's actually sand wasp.
Sand wasp.
Black-capped
Chickadee.
I'd have to agree with Matthew. Sand wasp.
Sand wasp.
I say
The deer
mouse.
mouse. All right, so this is talking about, like, what it'll do is it'll give me like a list of animals, and I already have looked ahead, so I know what page it's on. And I will go ahead and I will read what hospitality is. And this is what we're learning about the animals, is the hospitality. In my Father's house are many mansions. Well, actually, I will let Anna read.
In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am and where you may be also. John 14:12-3. 2
Alright.
through 3.
Matthew, you want to come up here and read? I'll let Emily read that. Do you want to read this? Remember to read slow and read loud and clear.
In the days when Scripture was being written, individual citizens were expected to welcome a traveler into the safety and comforts of their own home. Today, the traveler simply stays at the local motel, but hospitality does not just compromise caring for the needs of a traveler. Hospitality also involves benefits and blessings for the host's home and family. Scripture urges us not to neglect hospitality, though through it some have even entertained angels unaware. Hebrews 13:12. There are many illustrations of genuine hospitality in Scripture. One example shows how a gracious hostess who provided a suitable environment for a traveler was greatly rewarded by her guest. The scriptural account demonstrates the truth that in the same way we give to others, God gives to us.
All right, second. And if you want to go ahead and tell us what the answer was to the question.
The answer to the question was the deer mouse.
Hey, I got it right.
The deer mouse is a sociable little creature with a communication system all its own. Mice communicate with one another through a series of rapid taps against a hard surface. Taps against the hard surface or small chirps. This sound can be imitated by drawing one's fingernail over screen wire That tone and volume of sound are very depending on an object on which they drum. It is an accomplished soloist too. At its best, it is able to buzz or sing for a period of 5 to 10 seconds. These little animals have long, bicolored tails, which are at least 1/3 of their total body length. The mouse molts once a year in August. There are some color variations among the animals, and the male is slightly larger than the female. So these guys are like the Native Americans how they use drums to communicate.
So yeah, that would be cool that they would communicate like by making a sound like the Native Americans. Okay, and with the character sketches, it gives a picture of the mouse, and then the kids will have in their book, I don't know if y'all can see that, but they have a picture that they can color that's like that. And these books will relate to, like it give you an example of the story of living lessons on hospitality, how the, it was in Hebrews 13:2, and it will relate the mouse with this. How does the mouse illustrate the need to make it sure its environment is suitable? It did not take them long to decide to stay. There was plenty of food and an array of assorted material which could be used to build a warm, comfortable nest. So the mouse wants to be comfortable. It's like us. It wants to be exactly, in a nice, secure home, like the majority of us. The spot the mice had chosen was a summer home located in the Atlantic coast up by the oceanfront, unoccupied for a few years. It was a beach house. For a few weeks, the owners would visit, and then on the weekends, so the mice would go in and they would make their nest. But something even more important than food was on the female's mind now. She needed to begin to building a nest. She had to build that nest for her family. She had to build that nest and get her home ready. She had to get her home ready for these babies that were coming. She had to prepare her home. She had to prepare her mind. So it says the nest should be close to the food supply, and yet her young must be protected from possible danger. If you're a mom and you can relate to this, you understand. You got to have you want your kids protected in a sense of it's raining and cold out there. I don't want them out in the wet and cold rain today. It says after looking for a while, she found what seemed like the ideal location. She climbed inside. It was nice, and she was snug in her home expecting her family. Then her mate came to join her. Is that not funny how the mom to be went out. She found her home. She prepared it. Then the tables were turned, and the disinterested male played hard to get. And after much coaxing, she finally won him over. But until now, it seemed to be an ideal home. Then the owners returned to spend another weekend in preparation for their summer stay. The little deer mouse was extremely cautious. How much damage can a deer mouse do when it is in a camper, a vehicle? It's, where now have we found deer mice?
The barn, the camper, under vehicles, pretty much anywhere.
Anywhere.
In the paper.
So she would wait, and then she would slip out to try to get some food. And then, because she was a good mother, she stayed with her young. And she hoped that, the people that come back, she hoped they would leave and everything would be okay. The characteristics of a mouse in the scripture. Who would like to read? Whose turn is it? Sam. If you will stand up right here. And I make the kids stand up to read. For one, it's practice for when they're reading in front of a group of people. Number two, it's just, it helps you get out what you're trying to say better. Elizabeth, I would like for you to come here so I can hold you.
Okay. I'll try it.
Okay.
Mother?
Wherefore you shall make images of your mice that near land. Even though the Philistines were a heathen nation, they understood the destruction of their livelihood from the forces of nature or wildlife was in control of God. They examined their ways and removed the cause of God's anger by returning the sacred ark of the covenant which they had previously captured in battle. These also shall be unclean unto you among the creeping things that creep upon the earth, the mouse, after his kind. Leviticus 11:29. The Hebrew word for mice comes from two words which signify destruction of corn. The word referred to several kinds of species of the rodent. One species will devour any kernel of corn and any sapling that is planted. It even burrows under the ground to dig out the seed before it sprouts in spring. It eats the green blades and harvests. It climbs the stalks to plunder the ripe ears. Later the mouse invades the barn and continues to feast.
So what did Anna just read? What was she telling us?
About the mouse's diet.
The mouse's diet. And it said even though the Philistines were a heathen nation, they understood that the destruction of their livelihood from the forces of nature or wildlife was in control of God. They examined their ways and removed the cause of God's anger and returned. So it's talking about how your home, the structure of your home is so important. All right. And then it's going to talk to us about the physical characteristics of a mouse and how it makes its nest. And says the place which the deer mouse selected and prepared its nest was not a suitable home for her young. As a result, they perished in the heat because that mama couldn't leave that beach house because the owners had come back. So such an incident is not uncommon for the mouse to quick make its home in any convenient location. The female is loving and available to her young, but she does not always choose an appropriate environment to which to raise her young. And so, mamas, it's important to choose a good, healthy environment to raise your young in. Jacob, if you want to go over the how and whys, and you can just skim it if you want to, or read it, however you want to do it.
How and where does a deer mouse make its nest? One likely nest site is in a tree. The mouse chooses either the interior and abandoned squirrels or woodpeckers' home, or the exterior site, a bird's deserted nest. If it chooses the latter, it adds to the top of the structure to form a woven ball. It constructs two entrance holes, barely large enough for the mouse to fit through. The parents may build the nest on the ground underneath an old stump or log, in stone walls, cliffs, or caves. Another favorite location is buildings abandoned or unoccupied. Mice have infiltrated and frustrated many of their choice of nest-making items. It does not show particular preference and is just as quick to use a fabric from a favorite sweater as the cotton from an old worn-out sweatshirt. These little rodents are very creative in gathering material. An observer once watched a deer mouse strip off the paper covering and plasterboard. It grabbed the paper at the top of the wall and jumped off and scaled down the steep side, tearing strips as long as 2 feet. Over a period of time, the little mice stripped the board down to the bare plaster along the top of the wall. Equally resourceful are some of the nest locations: sealed boxes, closed drawers, mattresses, or even shoes. One incident is recorded of a man who took off his boots at 7 o'clock in the evening and found a nest containing young inside one boot when he returned at 10.
So they are quick to build their home. Is that what you all think?
Yes.
All right. Do you think, so it said that they'll use any material. And, okay, the next question is, how can you determine who the head mouse is? Mice group together for warmth during the winter. There's a class structure within the group itself. If they form a circle, the dominant mouse will be at its center, taking the warmest spot, and the lesser ones on the outskirts. Any interloper or intruder to the group is chased away. And it says a female may have her first family when she's only 35 days old. Be small in numbers, and so then it says how many young can the female have? How developed are the young at birth? Development sequence of young mice. And it goes on to talk about what does the fur color tell you about a mouse. Do you all know what the fur color tells us?
The age.
It tells us the age. Is anybody okay? What the first or juvenile is gray in color, and then the fur changes its color, and as it gets darker, that means that it is getting older. And then there will be a molt each year. And the deer mouse will eat what? What will a deer mouse eat?
Everything.
Everything. Deer mice are not a farmer's friend. And what are some of the predators to a deer mouse?
A red fox.
A fox.
Hawks.
Hawks. Man.
Owls
Cats.
and birds.
Okay, it says it is the most common of all North American rodents. The deer mouse is found almost everywhere south of the Arctic. Wherever mammalian life is possible, the mouse can be found. And it lives as high as 16,000 feet above sea level and as low as 270 feet below sea level. What enemies does the deer mouse have? Is the owl, the fox, the wood duck. There are even occasions when the wood duck preys on the lowly mouse. Probably the greatest threat is the owl, because the owl. What is something interesting you learned about the owl?
It hunts at night. It is possible that it hunts at day, but the hawks would get the owls if they didn't.
Wow. And the owl has the ability to do what? Remember, the owl has its young when it's still kind of cold and there's not a lot of foliage. So it can see to get plenty of mice. So it can go through like the trees,
Yes. The ears are like positioned on the face to where they can hear it to the ground instead of around
Right.
towards the earth.
Okay, it says, how does Scripture illustrate hospitality in providing a suitable environment? One person in Scripture received a reward which meant joy, then sorrow, then great joy. It demonstrated the principle of birth, death, and fulfillment of a vision. Who provided hospitality that was not sought and received a reward that was not requested? Who do we think? I kind of want to say, okay, it says one person in Scripture received a reward which meant joy, then sorrow, then great joy. It demonstrated the principle of birth, death, and fulfillment of a vision. Who provided hospitality that was not sought and received a reward that was not requested? Do any of you all know? I don't know. I would almost say Moses, because he received hospitality. He didn't ask to be taken. Is that right? Wrong? Who do you... Any guesses?
Noah.
You think Noah?
I think Noah didn't say to take taken.
No. Those who knew her might have assumed that she and her husband lived in two different worlds. He was old, she was young. He spent his energy in the field with his hired men. She spent long hours at home. Perhaps their close friends wondered what held them together. There were no children to bridge the gap of age difference and to provide common concerns and interests. But the fact was that she knew how to build fellowship with her husband. She strengthened their happiness and security. Scripture calls her a great woman. She was alert to the needs of those around her and discussed with her husband which needs they could meet with the resources God had given them. So that's part of being a good wife. That's part of being a good steward and serving your husband. And one day she invited a servant of the Lord to share a meal with them. They invited him to return to their home whenever he passed through their village. He accepted their invitation and ate many meals with them. She and her husband discussed how they could make their home more suitable for the needs of the servant of the Lord. They constructed an addition to their home, an extra room, and furnished it for their guests. God rewarded them for their care of his servant by giving them a child. But the joy was brought into their home by that child was turned into sorrow years later when their son died. The servant of the Lord was summoned, and he raised the child back to life. After her husband died and a great famine spread throughout the land, the widow and her son were advised by the servant of the Lord to leave and live in a neighboring country for 7 years. When she returned, she found that the others had moved into her house and claimed possessions of her fields. She went to the king to request the return of her house and land, and was granted. As she and her son entered the room, a man who was talking to the king exclaimed, "Why, this is the very woman I was telling you about. This is her son." This woman was then asked to explain in more detail how the servant of the Lord had raised her son to life. The king recognized that God had rewarded her, and he purposed to add further reward. He appointed an officer of the court, saying, "Restore all that was with her, and all the fruits of the field since the day she left the land, even until now." She gave fellowship, food, and lodging to the servant of the Lord, and God returned to the Shunammite woman a son, a home, and fruitful fields. With these provisions, she could continue to demonstrate the hospitality that made her a great woman. This is from Kings 4:8, 37, 8, 1, and 6. So, by that woman providing hospitality, that is how it's related to the mouse. So, what was the most interesting thing that you think you learned?
Their communication system.
Yes.
Communication system. How important is communication
Very important.
in a family?
Very, very, very important.
What is, has there ever been a time when you thought that I told you, look at the river, that I told you one thing, I said go do something, and our communication was off and it just messed everything up? So it's better to make sure that you have clear communication. What was the most interesting fact that you learned, Matthew?
It would have to be the way their
Mom,
the leadership system they have, like the.
All
I
right.
love coconut.
Anna, what was the...
I love coconut, Mother.
Okay. What was the best thing or the most interesting thing you learned?
I didn't know the wood duck would actually eat
I
a
didn't
mouse.
either.
I didn't think
I
of that.
wouldn't.
I thought they just ate plants and stuff in the.
I wouldn't have thought of that either. Delaney, what was the most interesting thing you learned?
I don't learn anything.
Oh, goodness. That's sad when that happens.
I didn't learn anything.
You didn't either? Miss Emily, what's the most interesting thing you learned?
The wood duck, how it eats the mice. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
The
Jacob?
one that eats
I've already
mice
said the
is-
communication.
The communication. All right. So, when we compare these, it shows how important the woman is in her home and how important it is for communication. And then we will have like a little discussion between us about it, and how the kindness was, it was actually Elisha. Because of her kindness to Elisha, the Lord removed her barrenness and gave her and her husband a son years later. And then the prophet responded, "Pray unto the Lord." So the boy, there is power in prayer. There's power in listening to the little things And sometimes you might get tired of being hospitable. Do y'all ever get tired of making sure the house is clean, making sure this is done, making sure it's safe? But, you know, we realize the importance